Thank you very much. It's a great privilege to follow James and the remarks he was making earlier in this conference, which set out the art historical and architectural reasons why at Soulton Hall it is appropriate to remember Erkenwald. The purpose of the words I need to put with you are that once you ally what James has said with the biographical and social context in which Sir Rowland Hill was living, we begin to emerge into a setting where we have a mystery to manage and a problem to solve. And at the moment, these matters are being shared with trusted partners on a confidential basis. But we are reaching a point where it becomes inevitable that whatever we do, other people will start to reach a point of analysis that we have come to over the last 2.5 years of shared work. And it is important that we prepare for that in a suitable way and also treat all stakeholders with appropriate respect on the way. And I would also say actually that doing nothing is a choice in this setting because the board is moving around us and it is potentially not a very good choice for reasons we will come to. So, Sir Roland Hill's life has been discussed in public much more in the last sort of 12 months than it has been for many decades, perhaps longer. It's appropriate to draw your attention to a public lecture delivered at St Mary Abbot Church in January of 2024, in which potential connections between him and William Shakespeare in particular, As You Like It, which James made such lovely reference to at the beginning of his remarks, which may be a cultural monument to this man's work. On the screen you have various sort of timelines of his work. I would like to sort of go through his life thematically. Most significantly, Sir Roland Hill comes down to us as a publisher, specifically the publisher of the Geneva Bible, a book which has been slightly overwritten and set to one side for necessary reasons to do with English statecraft and the level of readiness we had for democracy at different phases after it was published. Happily, we are now a democracy, so some of those questions are less raw than they have been. But in addition to publishing the Geneva Bible, he published a book on arithmomachia, which is a scholarly game to do with mathematics, and it is already in the public record that his house contains a board for the playing of this game in its prayer room. He publishes on the politics of the limited number of allies that England in the Renaissance has in the neighbourhood of Europe and the Middle East. So he publishes on the history of Turkey, he's interested in Greece, he's interested in the classics. He publishes, quite interestingly, a text of the laws of Geneva, and it's an interesting aside that on that he uses a half eagle and key printing stamp with Post Tenebrae Lux written around it, which appears a couple of decades later being used for the second Quattro edition of Midsummer Night's Dream. So that's linking back to some points already made. His esoteric publishing also includes medicine. And that's significant because he refounds all of the hospitals in London out of the Reformation sort of churn and the need to renew commitment to the civic weal, to the common weal. He's a prodigiously successful merchant, and his mercantile activities are concentrated in what is now Germany, and that is significant for some things I'm going to say in a second. And it was also highlighted by James around the flow of garnets into Europe and our artistic use of diaper brickwork. He's also a significant stakeholder and commissioner in the world of art. This is manifested in the fact that the house he builds here at Soulton is invoking a theatre, and there's an excellent video setting out how that would do on the Bürgergenicht channel, which delegates may want to consider. But he's also financially involved and politically involved in drama in London and here in Shropshire. In London, he regulates drama in the office of Lord Mayor before that becomes a responsibility of the Chamberlain, and notably relaxes the access to drama, and he financially supports with his friend John Gresham the revival of the Midsummer Watches, which are subject to a royal prohibition prior to that, and there were 9,000 people in the cast, bright harness, thousands of costumes. So he's an extraordinary force. To a Renaissance person, he would have been very well known. And of course, James has already made some remarks about his political sophistication and subtlety, which it is important that we sit with for a second concerning the architectural project that he has built here and his ability to survive the Reformation period under Henry VIII, the arrival at Calvinism and the iconoclasm of that period, then renewing, after a brief period of disfavour, his high office and trust to the extent that he's trusted with treason trials in the reign of Queen Mary, despite being known to be a Protestant, and it has emerged since engaged in Bible publications. And then it appears working in partnership with his friend and colleague Matthew Parker for the Elizabethan religious settlement, which manifests in the last 2 years of his life, which he has obviously got a significant role in preparing for. The circumstances of the high point of, well, one view of the high point of Sir Roland Hill's life of public service is the year of his mayoralty. And it's a year like no other, because the protectorate of Edward Seymour, Protector Somerset, is collapsing as this is happening. And he takes, not the first Seymour to sort of endanger the body of the king, potentially, he takes the young boy king, Edward VI, to Windsor. This is Edward Somerset the Protector. And his collapsing regime means he needs military support, and the most readily available army that can be raised is by request to London. And this emergency is happening in a context where the mayoralty is changing, because it is autumn 1549. And a letter is sent by Seymour to both the outgoing and incoming Lord Mayor, because he wants to be doubly sure that the formalities, which are important for later in this lecture, have been fully and properly observed for whoever he's addressing to make this request. It is also important to understand that taking the mayoralty in 1549-50 coincides with a high point in Calvinism and iconoclasm in the Reformation period. Bishop of London, Ridley, is directing the removal of stone altars, which we will come to. And the senior civilian authority within the Liberty of London is the Lord Mayor. So any default or lack of cooperation from the ecclesiastical community with those demands, requests, however we want to view them, is going to fall to the Lord Mayor to attend to. I'm going to bring your attention here to a published material which deals with a specific aspect of what I was just inhabiting concerning the removal of altars, and specifically taking your attention to St Paul's Cathedral. So this is from the Chronicle of Greyfriars. And we can see that public holiday was manipulated by the city fathers in order to create a distraction for this event. And for reasons that James has set out in his excellent lecture, disturbing the high altar of St Paul's Cathedral and its connection to St Erkenwald is intensely problematic for the longest time prior to the Reformation, because it has repeatedly caused riots to do this. So it is interesting that in anticipation of potential difficulties, the city authorities have created a reason for people to look elsewhere. And we can see that in the course of the removal of the altar of St Paul's Cathedral, there are deaths. People feel strongly about this, and the stone altar is removed. It's helpful that the sources that have come down to us allow us to see something of the inner religious mind of Sir Roland Hill. and it's needful for me to say that we are obviously dealing with a sophisticated politician and businessman with practical instincts. So I am not inviting this conference to make a conclusion about what motivations Rowland Hill is approaching his life with during his period of office, but it is for people to form their own opinion about how he feels about religious questions, and he is a complex character, so there's work to do there. But if we sit for a second with a practical politician concerned, as he will have been, because this is what we're looking at here on this slide, is a mayor-making ceremony in St Paul's Cathedral. If we sit with his instincts just as a political survivor and a holder of an office, the legitimacy of how he comes to hold his office is going to be exceptionally important, particularly in view of the fact that Somerset was anxious that the formalities were properly satisfied, so anxious that he wrote to 2 people, so it would definitely hit the right person. And as James was saying in his remarks, the office of Lord Mayor as the successor to the Port Reeves goes back beyond the conquest into deep antiquity. And there is a custom that the rising up to Sir Roland Hill's mayoralty, that in order to sort of soundly inhabit your new office, you give some respect to Bishop William, who restated, because it's actually so controversial, it's not going to be renegotiated. It's capturing a statement of fact as existing before. At the moment of the Reformation, at the moment of the conquest, the status of London is potentially up for grabs, and Bishop William, as a Catholic bishop, sees that exactly the settlement that existed before the conquest will persist afterwards, and out of respect for that work, as with Bishop William occupying a kind of status of intercessor, the Lord Mayors of London have respected that. So in the context of a moment of reformation where intercession of that kind is potentially problematic, Rowland Hill does a very provoking thing and revisits and discharges that Catholic right. So why he's doing this is open for debate, but that he does it is recorded. And I think it is fair to interpret the fact that he did that as an expression of resistance against the disruption to the modalities that confer his authority. So what we might therefore be able to say is concern with relics of St Erkenwald, who is a successor to, who is occupying that role, is something that Rowland Hill would have. He would be respectful to Erkenwald because we can see him being respectful to Bishop William. It's a question I'm seeking to bring you to in this conference, what happened to bones in general at St Paul's Cathedral and certain bones specifically. And it's an important thing to note that there was a potentially an unusual treatment of the bones at St Paul's, where they were treated with manifest and very clear respect. These are the bones in the charnel house. So those are not the bones of saints, but they're the bones of people we can't identify, but they're nevertheless being treated with an unusual level of respect. It's appropriate to bring your attention to the fact that Rowland Hill was being able to recover from a period of disfavour under Queen Mary, and was made a commissioner against heretics, which is an unusual thing for a man who is notoriously identified with Protestantism to be able to do. In addition, he has the right to seize prohibited texts and artifacts. The fact that he has that power and is trusted to exercise it is of very high significance for things I'm hoping to take you to later. And it is remarkable indeed that in the reign of Elizabeth, he is immediately conferred with the same powers to seize prohibited texts and books. So we are dealing with a man who is incredibly adaptable and pragmatic, and we can go further and potentially try and look inside his mind, but he has the power and the status to hold things and be excused for holding them that very few people else would have. And I think it is unique that he occupies this status where he is able for both sides to seize prohibited items. So, what did he do with those powers? Well, fortunately, we can see something he did in London. And that was not capable of being clear to us until the after effects of the Blitz. So Rowland Hill has a mansion in London in addition to his accommodation on the continent of Europe and his house at Soulton Hall, which physically interconnects with the Mercers complex on Cheapside. And it's actually important to note in the course of this lecture that the property he has at interconnecting with the Mercers after his life changes hands to be occupied by a number of people who go on to hold important civic offices. So rather than a kind of dynastic status, that is connected with office holding and status achieving within the Mercers specifically and the city more generally. Which, the reason why I ask you to hold that in mind is that Soulton Hall, though the manor of Soulton has an equivalent status. If you go back in its root of title from 1556, you can see the Cotton family, the Lodge family, the Hill family, and another Lord Mayor of London have all owned this house. So if you file it in a similar category to this mansion at London, it's an important thing for you in London. It's an important thing for you to potentially do. In any event, the important thing that I want to bring your attention to is this exquisitely beautiful and explicitly Germanic statue, which is one of the last flowerings of Renaissance art, of Catholic art pre the Reformation in London. And we only have this statue because the Blitz in London destroyed the Mercers buildings, and in the course of reconfiguring and restating those buildings, this was found buried under the chapel in a socket of sand. It's inconceivable that this was buried without Rowland Hill's knowledge, because he's master of the Mercers, joint equal fourth, 4 times with one other person who's achieved that accolade, and he is active in the affairs of the Mercers all through the period where this happens. This was done with his knowledge and involvement. I told you that is a specifically Germanic sculpture, and that's an important thing to hold, because on the right of the image that you can see in front of you, we have a 1510 illustration from a best-selling Dürer illustration that would have been popular in the territory in which Rowland Hill did his mercantile activities, and therefore familiar to him from his youth when he is in his early 20s, showing you the entombment of Christ. And there are a couple of things I want to bring your attention to in this Dürer. The first is that the portal that gives entry to the tomb is shown in the upper right image above in the upper right of the image above Christ's head. The second thing is that behind the committal party, there is a gateway in a wall, and then the third thing is that Christ is being laid onto a funerary couch, which is a kind of trough, for want of a better way to explain it. And we have already seen that in James's lecture, the mesh of codes that Soulton Hall exists inside. I want to bring your attention to the most senior room in the house, which counterintuitively is not on any of the principal floors and is not accessed off the sort of formal portal. And because of the way the house is speaking, we need to understand that when you look at the house, the faces which appear symmetrical, and it's very early to be doing this at all, are all slightly in error on that until you come to the eastern face. So anyone filtering the sides works out that the eastern face of the house is the senior side because of that use of dominant symmetry, which you can see in the image. That eastern face is aligned with the rising sun on Easter morning, which is indicated by the old map you can see on the left-hand side of the screen. So having identified the senior side of the house and its interest in Easter, we can see that there is actually on this one symmetrical face of the house, only one central window, and that tells us that that is the most senior room in that part of the house. So, returning to these Jura images, there's now another one introduced to the presentation for you of the resurrection, and we can see that in that image the rising sun is going through the gateway behind Christ in this image. And that's what I would like you to bring your attention to on that image. And on the earlier slide, I brought those three things to your attention, which I'd like you to hold to now. The portal above Christ's head being off and to the right, the trough type arrangement of the funerary couch, and the gate off to the east. What is in Soulton Hall behind that only central window on the only symmetrical face is an extraordinarily curious room, and it is a double cube of 8 foot by 8 foot by 16 foot, and it's half underground. And there are 12 beams in the ceiling, and there are 4 double cube blocks behind what I'm interpreting as an altar in the big image, which suggests Matthew, Mark, Luke and John, and in the ceiling there are 12 beams, which invites you to think about the disciples. The significant thing about this room is that it's under the main spinal wall that carries the roof, and the insertion of this room has interrupted that structural integrity of the building. So we can see inside the building its importance because it disturbs the structural setting of the house, and we can see outside because it has the only central window. It is clearly an incredibly important room, and it contains a slab of limestone, Purbeck marble, which is roughly the size of a cathedral altar. And I ask you to remember that Sir Roland Hill removed altars as a matter of record, and that specifically St Paul's Cathedral's altar appears to have been disturbed during his mayoralty. So this slide is reiterating those characteristics I've just set before you. There is another mystery that needs to be put before you, and this is only visible some of the time. In fact, the slide on the left-hand side of the screen is an image from 2016, which we have scrubbed from the internet recently because it is dangerous for this image to be accessible to other people. So this appeared in after a period of extended drought and then rain, and we think it predates the building of the house because its orientation is not taken from the house, it's taken from celestial north, south, east and west, which is probably for discussion in this conference and not for this presentation to inhabit what that might imply. But it's enough for this presentation to show you that there is a tradition of building tabernacles which is proximate to the people involved in this work. So the image on the right-hand side shows you Heidelberg University greeting Elizabeth Stewart, and the chaplain involved in the Heidelberg University is a member of Corpus, and via Corpus we get back to Matthew Parker, a friend of Rowland Hill's. So it might feel extraordinary to say that this was a behaviour that could have been done at Soulton Hall, but if we sit with the fact that it did happen with people related to this within a couple of decades of that work, it becomes a less remarkable thing to say. So, as I explained at the beginning of the conference, the purpose of my remarks, the purpose of this conference is to bring together trusted stakeholders in an environment of confidentiality and concern to address a situation that appears to have come to us, where there is a non-trivial risk that the relics of St Erkenwald were removed by Rowland Hill and brought here. And even if they weren't, we have to sit with the fact that it will be a conclusion reached by a number of people that that could have happened, and we need to be ready for that. And what being ready for that looks like is a question for trusted people, and it's certainly not a question for one family of farmers to deal with alone. And we are extremely grateful to the priests and scholars and other institutional partners who have been so supportive to this point. But we are reaching, I think, an inescapable conclusion that what is currently a private question will be a public question within the next 12 months. And the safety of what may be the altar of St Paul's Cathedral is certainly a London altar, plus the relics of a saint, needs to be attended to with some pace and concern. So we are very grateful to everybody who's attending this conference for their support with that question, and look forward to respectful cooperation on these questions. Thank you.